prayer, pledge of allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chamber. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Here.
Mr. Gabbard?
Here.
Mr. Geraci?
Here.
Mr. Kelch?
Here.
Mr. DiNardo?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Braden?
Here.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. All members present. Moving on to item E, emergency dispatch communications and the voting on the ordinance to allow the mayor to sign an agreement with Hamilton County. Mr. Geraci?
Before we get started with that, are we able to amend this agenda as it says January 20th, 2020?
Oh, it sure does. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Eagle Eye. May I have a motion to amend the agenda? Mr. Thompson?
Second that.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Moving on to item E, emergency dispatch communications and the voting on the ordinance to allow the mayor to sign an agreement with Hamilton County. Mr. DiNardo.
I'd like to make a motion we have all three readings, please.
Motion by Mr. DiNardo to have all three readings.
Yes, please.
May I have a second?
Well, just to clarify, I mean, I am going to second it, but can we just clarify that because of the way that's labeled, can we just clarify that of the ordinance in that motion? So
Yes.
all three readings of the ordinance is in our packet. Yeah, I'll second that.
Yes, that was the intent. Thanks.
Second by Mr. Bonson. Any discussion? Mr. DiNardo?
Yeah. My reason for making the motion was for a lot of the same reasons that two previous council members wanted to have three readings last time, so it's of the same principle. I imagine people are going to vote on the ordinance however they're going to vote on the ordinance, but this is just for the motion for three readings.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Geraci?
I'd appreciate having one reading tonight and then come back tomorrow and decide, mainly because I do have at least one question that I would like members and Mr. Mayor to think about at least tonight, because I don't know that I'm going to have the answer tonight from any of the members or the mayor. So that's the only reason I'd request one reading tonight and then just finish it up tomorrow.
Anyone else? Mr. Thompson?
Question to Mr. Geraci. Would you like to go ahead and ask your question that you would like to pose? Being that we're in discussion right now.
I'd still appreciate at least one reading tonight.
Mr. Bonson?
Thank you. I mean, this is going to be, I think, our sixth meeting where we've discussed this, and at the last meeting, we were willing to do all three readings of an ordinance. It did eventually get shot down, but you know, I think we should give this ordinance that same shot. I think we've gotten the information. You know, we may not have been happy about how this started, but we have had multiple meetings now to get the information. There's been opportunities to go and to visit Hamilton County Dispatch, and we've heard from the head there. I mean, at this point, I think dragging this out is really counterproductive. I would just say let's just have all three readings, and then we can all vote how we vote on the actual passage of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Bonson. Anyone else? Mr. Tracy?
All right, I'll ask one of these questions here, and I do want everybody to think about this. Over 6 months of an investigation to disband dispatch, did anyone within the city approach Hamilton County about obtaining a percentage of the 25% sales tax that they are utilizing for the communication center? It seems that since they reallocated a tax that was voted on by taxpayers for Union Terminal repairs, which had a sunset clause of 2020, and provided some of those funds for Hamilton County Communications. The residents of Norwood should be entitled to some of this, as well as our communications center, since we do make up 2.5% of the county population. If the tax were still allocated toward Union Terminal, then I wouldn't be asking this question, but the fact that the commissioners are reallocating funds for emergency services, it seems reasonable that Norwood, having its own communications center, would be entitled to at least the 2.5%. They're looking at $40 million in the sales tax this year. That comes out to roughly, about $1 million for us. So has anybody in the city approached the county commissioners or anybody within the county to find out if we can receive a little bit of that sales tax money?
Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to make 2 points in response to that. The first is just that sales tax does not just cover the Hamilton County Communications Center. I mean, they're basically, the way it was explained to me when I went and visited the dispatch center was that it covers public safety in general. So I think it's like the coroner, the crime lab, the sheriff's office, like all of those got, from my understanding, got a boost in their budget, or at least they're using that to cover that budget. Jail as well. I don't think that the Hamilton County from my understanding, it's not just that. And then even still, there's really no, I don't think the city of Cincinnati is getting a cut of that. The city of Cincinnati has, 30 or 40% of the county's population. So I just can't imagine that they would give up a percentage of that when it makes sense to everybody for more shared services. So, I guess my question also would be, did you do research on this to find out if that was possible? I mean, if you have information contrary to that, then I think we, would like to hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Mr. Tracy?
I haven't had time to go and do my own research, seeing as we've had like 3 days before this meeting popped up. I do have a very busy schedule, Mr. Bonzo. I guess I'm sure you just don't know that. But trying to find an extra hour in the day is pretty hard, but I've done as much research as I possibly can over 3 or 4 days.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you. I just want to express, my sympathy for the lack of time of the previous council member, and I hope that he gets more time. But I will just say, I don't see what one more day then is going to have this question all of a sudden answered if there wasn't time in the previous 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Anyone else? Mr. Tracy.
Well, since you brought up City of Cincinnati, I'm sure, their residents are all up in arms as well, that they're being double taxed, just like we are. So why isn't the City of Cincinnati and their residents up in arms about getting rid of their communication center and just going with Hamilton County?
Mr. Tracy.
All right, I'll move on. Anybody that is for this, can you, other than financial, what are the benefits? Anybody can answer. What are the benefits other than finance?
Mr. Mayor.
You're saying anybody, so I would like to chime in. I think we went through pretty extensively that it is not only a financial decision, and it's not only a decision it's not a decision based on our dispatch being poor. They provide a good service for us. We've made that clear. And we've made it clear there's scalability. I guess there's some people that listen to what we say when we're talking about this, and others that cannot hear it at all because they're not active listening. But it's scalability, it's more resources, it's the ability to dispatch if they had a problem in dispatch, to dispatch in multiple locations. It's the training that's involved, it's the command structure, the staff that's in place to keep the system going, and it's financially, there are benefits to the city for that. But quite frankly, this has not been, and I know people keep on saying, and they keep on throwing it out there because they think that's the way to do it, is it's a financial decision. The big decision on this is not the biggest part is not financial. I'll call it my ability to sleep at night. That's, for me as the mayor, having the ability to recognize that if something happened to our dispatch, and being a mayor through a pandemic, having the ability to look at it and say, what other resources do we have? Our part-time dispatchers are dispatchers in other regional dispatch centers or not, but that's not the right way to run the business of dispatch, of emergency dispatch. It really is sustainability. That's my biggest factor. One of the biggest reasons why is because I said, if COVID hit our dispatchers and took out 6 of them, and then it hit other regional areas, we'd be in real trouble, real trouble. And that's my problem with, I've been really challenged with police and with fire. If we had COVID run through our firehouse, how do we really, and we had a lot of discussion on, mutual aid. Well, if it's hitting our firehouse, it's hitting other firehouses. So where's your mutual aid coming from? So there's a lot of the biggest reason for this. And I think I'm answering this question directly and head on. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind. This is not a financial decision strictly for me. It is a sustainability, it's scalability, having the ability to take on and take bigger challenges when they come down the pipe, when we have a fire, having the people in place to take care of that. It's really all those things, and it increases our ability to communicate within our region. And I think that's an important part too. So there's a lot to it, and I think we've went through many times the other factors that really come into play, rather than it just being money. Quite frankly, it's not just about the money. It is a factor, but there are so many other areas that this brings: resources, sustainability. It's a weak link in our emergency services. We're trying to remove that weak link. And that's really what it comes down to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Tracy?
Through the chair to the mayor to comment on his comments, I guess. So he's saying that we have more resources going to county. I disagree because of what we're losing as far as what our dispatchers do. Our dispatchers do probably 110% over what they should be doing as a dispatch. Multiple locations. They only have one location at their comm center right now. Yes, they have another building that they can utilize.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The pandemic. Okay, maybe it runs through our dispatch, but maybe it runs through Hamilton County Dispatch as well. What happens when it runs through Hamilton County Dispatch? Now we're in the same position as what we would be if we had our own dispatch here. Correct?
They have 50 dispatchers, we have 8. 50 compared to 8?
You have an 8.
Just a number.
Mr. Mayor, can I finish, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry.
You talk about sustainability. We have sustainability with our own dispatch. Everything that you discussed, we have the exact same thing as Hamilton County. So the benefits that you're suggesting are not really benefits because it's the exact same thing that we have here with our own dispatch. The exact same thing. We have the manpower. We have a location just like they do, and we have the ability to move a location if we have to. We have more resources based on the work that they do than what county has. You know, they do the 311 system already. You call in the non-emergency, they send you to wherever you need to be sent to, the health department, the water department, waterworks. You call their non-emergency, they'll send you to that person. They'll answer your questions as just about as best as they can, as you stated the 311 would do. We'll be taking police officers off the road between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. 5 days a week and all weekends. Need to install new equipment into the firehouse. It's going to cost us $100,000 to install that equipment. police are going to be on a highly congested channel. Our radio runs here in Norwood are thick, they're heavy, and they're already going to go onto a congested channel, which is going to cause a little backup on that channel. It's going to cause a little delay in getting through. You're going to hear a busy tone as it's called, and it's going to be difficult for not only Norwood officers, but other officers on that channel, whether it be Marymount, whether it be Gulf Manor, whether it be Newtown, Columbia Township, the sheriff, all trying to get through on one channel. It's going to be congested. As far as mutual aid, Mr. McCabe had stated that he can deny any mutual aid that he wants, and that's fine if he wants to say we're not running into Cincinnati ever. Who's to say Cincinnati's not going to come back and say we won't be running mutual aid into Norwood? They can do the exact same thing to us. I've proven, and I've come in here and I've proven that our run times, our response times could slow down with mutual aid. I have not seen anybody that has said that our run times will get better come in here and show me on a piece of paper that our run times will get better. But I've come in to prove that the firehouses within the proximity of Norwood have the opportunity to produce longer run times than what we have if we have to rely on mutual aid. We keep hearing about a deadline for February 1st. Well, this was a self-imposed deadline set by the mayor. This wasn't set by anybody else. This was set by him. We would have never heard of this back in November had the whistle not been blown on it. You know, he would have come up here in January, presented this to us and said, here you go, it's done in February. We'd have never had these 6 discussions or 7 discussions on this. We'd have had 1 or 2 and that would have been about it. And, you know, hopefully I don't disrespect Chief Kramer with this comment, but it kind of rang I don't know, it rang something in my head while I was listening over and over to it again. He had said something to the effect of, this is not the hill I want to die on. To me, I took that as either you fall in line with what's going on or figure something else out. That small comment, whether it be a slip of the tongue, something he didn't want to say, it was said, and it hit me to a point that it didn't sound like he was really committed to this, and I'm disappointed in the fact that we're still, again, I'm going to say it, rushing this through and not having a board of residents.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Darno.
Yeah, I told my wife I wasn't going to say much, actually. The last bit about Chief Kramer, I wouldn't have responded apart from, I think that it was my understanding exactly the opposite that he said. He said, you're here so you can tell me if I'm wrong. I was trying to figure out if this is a hill I want to die on. And after a bunch of deliberation, I decided this is something worth pursuing. Is that about right? Thumbs up. So that's the opposite of what you just said. I just wanted to clear that point up because I think that those 2 guys put a lot of time into this, and there's 100 different ways we can be looking at it, but from a pure kind of what they did, let's be careful and be fair. But all the other stuff, it's fine. I wasn't going to respond to other items.
Thank you, Mr. Nardo. Anyone else? Mr. Bonzo.
So I'm getting kind of frustrated here because, I think we're entitled to our own opinions on how we think this could affect, the current operations, how it could affect police and fire. Maybe if you want to talk about, there's things that you can talk about, but we're not entitled to our own facts here. And, I mean, I've got at least 4 points here of some stuff Mr. Tracy just said that is untrue. You know, it's been stated, and I'm just going to go through the 4 points that I've got. So it'll cost $100,000 to get the fire department ready. The fire chief has said that's not true, and I would invite him after I'm done speaking to clarify that. The police will be on a highly congested channel. This is a worry that I had originally, but when I visited, I asked about that, and they're going to put us on the east side channel. And the
Which is
east side
highly
channel,
congested.
even with us on it, is still going to be less congested than the west side channel, or when I say congested, there'll be less radio traffic than the west side channel currently has. So it still won't even be, we still won't even be on the the highest traffic channel. So I just feel like that's not a great reason. Again, Mr. Tracy is attacking the fire chief, saying the fire chief doesn't understand how mutual aid works. And the fire chief made it very clear that our mutual aid, the call system or the alarm order won't change. And Mr. Tracy also said that he's come to prove that our run times will be longer with mutual aid. And again, we talked about it at that meeting. I think the work that Mr. Tracy did, I think it was admirable, all the time that he put in. Like, I was actually really impressed with how much time he put in, and I think many other council members were impressed as well. But it didn't prove what he was trying to make it prove, because the order of our mutual aid doesn't change. It actually just gets better because there's automatic systems that, because we're using Hamilton County Dispatch, and that's where St. Bernard also uses for their fire. So it actually gets quicker. And then they also have, again, and I know that you'll say that this is not true, but I saw it with my own eyes. They have the button, a CAD-to-CAD system where they can basically request Cincinnati help without having to actually pick up the phone and call. And that's what we have to do today. And that would be for the second alarm or the third, whatever. That'd be for the after St. Bernard. So I would actually like to see if the fire chief could come up and just clarify on the two things. How much is it going to cost to get the fire department ready? And that talk about the mutual aid. Is our mutual aid changing with moving to the system? That makes okay? Would you mind? That's okay.
Good evening. The cost for the fire department to migrate to Hamilton County for basic service, it'll cost us $5,700 to update our informer to receive the runs. It'll cost us just under $3,000 to reprogram our radios. That's the plain skinning. Now, yes, so we're going to do MDC upgrades because we don't have them. We were going to do that whether we kept our dispatch or not. So that investment is, we're going to save around $39,000 total. That's it.
But we were already going to spend that $39,000.
Well, it's been in the needs assessment that's been provided through the budgetary process the last 3 years. If you guys don't see how we submit our budget, we submit not only the appropriations asked across the year, we also provide a capital budget request. We do a 6-year plan, which will migrate to a 7-year plan. And with that, we provide a 8-page needs assessment across the board from the fire department, whether it's building needs, technology needs, manpower needs. We provide that every year for at least the last 3 years that I've done it. Mr. DiNardo has seen that, I know for a fact. I'm sure the finance committee has seen it. But that's what we do. I mean, we plan. We make sure that we have our stuff in order, ready to go. In terms of mutual aid, I think there's some semblance of an idea that we empty our firehouse for mutual aid calls. And that's absolutely false. We have a standing order. We send one fire truck out of town. We send one ambulance out of town. That's it. That's all that's available for mutual aid response to the county. We actually park our units as restricted within the county CAD system. In regards to the radio traffic, they actually inputted every radio key mic. So every time a radio was keyed in the last year, the county inputted that into their traffic and said, how is this going to affect? Because they were looking at potentially separating radio channels. And because they're technically savvy, they understand what they do, they inputted all that information and said, we're still going to be below the West for police. That's a fact. You know, there was a lot of information gathering. There's a lot of work put into this in terms of looking at, hey, what are we going to do? If you think that the police chief or myself, sorry, but I don't speak for you, If you think that we were going to recommend anything that was going to degrade service, that's absolutely crazy in my mind. We are responsible for providing the best services possible for the citizens and visitors of the city. We're also responsible for providing the best service for our staff members. The scalability is an enormous issue for us. You know, some of the items that Councilman Dracy talks about, the resources they do, that's the exact reason we shouldn't have that done. They shouldn't be doing teletype stuff. They shouldn't be answering phone calls for the water department or the recreation department. They're emergency dispatchers. They should be tied to the radio for any police radio traffic. Not saying they don't do that, but then they get the phones ringing in the background, and that's asinine. In a public safety environment where, number one, the people on the street are the most important asset of this city, I can't think of a good reason why. The other reason, too, our staffing within dispatch is incorrect. It doesn't meet the national standard. We should have a dedicated call taker. That's all they do is answer the phone and transfer those calls to the correct operator. We operate primarily with 2 dispatchers. Was there another point that you wanted me to address, sir?
No, I mean, could you just also talk, well, no, I think you covered the ones that were talked about tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief McCabe.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Tracy.
I'd like to discuss the upgrades that I was talking about, because the fire department is going to have to upgrade speakers and everything else to accommodate the run. They are going to have to. Mr. McCabe, you shake your head no, but I'm telling you right now, I've already looked into that. You're going to have to upgrade speakers and everything else for their electronic dispatch.
That's false.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Mr. Tracy, I think what you're doing is trying to fearmonger, and that's correct.
I appreciate you not saying that I'm trying to fearmonger everybody. I'm not. I'm stating facts, sir.
Thank you, Chief McCabe. Thank you, sir. The motion on the floor by Mr. DiNardo, second by Mr. Bonzels. I have all 3 readings. Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all 3 readings?
Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contractual agreement with the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners to provide public safety emergency dispatch services to the city of Norwood. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contractual agreement with the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners to provide public safety emergency dispatch services to the city of Norwood. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contractual agreement with the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners to provide public safety emergency dispatch services to the city of Norwood.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to pass the ordinance. May I have a second? Mr. DiNardo. Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
No.
Mr. Geraci?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
No.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present, we have 4 ayes, 3 noes. Motion fails.
Motion what?
Passes.
Motion passes, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Anything further? Mr. Gabriel.
Motion adjourned.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard to adjourn. May I have a second? Mr. Thompson, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting, we have 6 ayes, 1 no. We're adjourned.